Hi, welcome to another Coffee Time Chat. Today we focus on the challenges of hotel staffing and the ongoing crisis the industry faces not only today, but more worryingly, the trends for the future. And this is where our guests, Bill and Lorraine, step in to talk us through the recent talent trends study from Strategic Solution Partners, one of our expert partners. Back in 2019, Strategic Solution Partners started this talent trend study, and since then it has continually highlighted the workforce challenges, many of which still haven't been addressed effectively by the industry. There are fewer people entering hospitality, and more are retiring earlier. For those working in the industry, they want quality of life and flexibility. And this labour shortage, it's felt at all levels, but most severely on property. In this discussion, we touch on a number of wide-ranging topics, whilst focusing in around the foreboding trends, the challenges for educational institutions, and how much responsibility actually lies at the door of the industry itself. Really hope you enjoy the conversation. Hey, both of you, thanks for joining us. Bill, Lorraine, really appreciate giving up your time today to talk about a very interesting study that you guys have done. But I'm not gonna steal any thunder. You guys are going to be talking about it. But before we get started, let's kind of set the scene and at least get you guys introduced to the people watching or listening to this. So, Bill, if I can hand over to you first, and you can give us a brief introduction as to who you are, that would be great.
Trevor, great to see you again. Thanks again for having us.
Hey, no problem.
Just down and dirty background. I've been in the industry for probably about 40 years. Started out in operations, started my company about 15 years ago with my partner, Jacqueline. And the study, hopefully we're going to talk about, and I won't steal too much thunder either, has been something we're near and dear to our hearts, and really, I think sets us apart from our competitors from the standpoint of we're interested in the industry and what's impacting the industry, not necessarily just what's impacting our business.
Yeah, good point. And Lorraine, welcome. First time you and I have sat on one of these conversations, so thanks for joining us. If I could ask you to give us a brief intro, that would be great.
Thank you, Trevor and Bill, and for having me. And I've spent probably the last 25 plus years as a travel analyst and a research specialist, and I founded the research practice at Focusrite. My specialty being hotel and hospitality. So this is very near and dear to my heart, this topic.
Is right up your street.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, let's start off. If we could set the scene, Bill, if I could kind of come to you, as you say, this study is something that you do that is different to your competitors. I know it's something very much, very dear to your heart in terms of what this is trying to achieve and trying to communicate. So could you just give us a bit of background? How many studies have you done? How's it changed over the years? And maybe where you've put a slight different emphasis this year, just to set the scene. That would be great.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll kind of turn a little bit of this over to Lorraine at some point because, she's seen the evolution, and that we're just so proud to have Lorraine with us because she's the brains of the operation when it comes to actually sussing out what's important. But what we wanted to do, Jacqueline and I, was really kind of think about where is the industry going, not necessarily where it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've evolved our study through the years, and again, I'll defer to Lorraine a little bit about where we've been and where we think we want to go. But it's always been about looking at the depth of the labor pool.
Mm-hmm.
And while prior studies that we've all seen have been fixed in just what is the talent pool, what is the unemployment rate, what is the appealability of the hospitality industry, et cetera, et cetera. We've tried to look at it every year uniquely and differently relative to what are those incoming potential employees looking like, what are the practices of the employers,
Mm-hmm.
and where are the gaps.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a brief overview. Lorraine,
Yeah.
This has been what, our fourth or fifth year?
Well, you've been doing this, you've been ahead of the curve because you've been doing this for several years. And even before COVID, when things were starting to soften in the talent pool and hospitality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it got decimated. And then for about 3 years, I've been working with you on the paper as we're watching hospitality talent slowly get rebuilt. And that's where we've seen a lot of the opportunities and a lot of the setbacks. And that's what we've been following in these papers and this research.
So this is, yes. So as you say, you were doing it prior because, I mean, this is not what we're going to talk about here. Is some potentially deep rooted issues, and I know that you've got a number of foreboding trends we're going to touch on, but this isn't brand new. I mean, this has been a challenge for a number of years, hasn't it? The issues we're facing in terms of hiring and bringing talent on board. This is pre-pandemic, and just as you said, Lorraine, been exacerbated since the pandemic. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And also a lot of it has to do with just the perception of the hospitality industry as kind of more of a lower paying, higher stress job.
Yeah.
So, that's something that has definitely been around for many years.
Okay.
And I know we're going to get into the trends, but it used to be you just looked at the hospitality industry as a separate industry.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what's happening in the hospitality industry. Post-COVID, it's like, okay, the competition for that same talent
Yep.
is so pervasive and so broad that where somebody, these kids wanted to get into IT
Yep.
for the sake of discussion. Well, they all signed up for IT jobs, and then the IT industry dried up and they pulled all the jobs from them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not necessarily thinking about going into hospitality.
No.
But again, that competition for the talent is so cross-functional now where it never used to be. And that's again, we'll get into the trends,
and I think that's the thing. That's
interesting to
something
see
you've
that
identified,
evolution.
isn't it? That we're going to. So let's dig into it. Big picture first, and then we'll drill down into some core areas. What's the big headline from this year's study findings? Bill, if you kind of give us the macro executive headline, and then Lorraine, I'll jump in and dive in with you into some of the detail. What's the big statement?
You know what? I'm going to reverse the order and let Lorraine take it.
I love it when it's dynamic. Go on, Lorraine.
Right, 'cause it's hard to put it all right in one sentence, Bill.
I know, right?
All right, so I'm going to try to do that. I would say there's simply not enough trained and motivated talent to allow the hospitality industry, allow hotels to operate successfully for the future. When we think of innovation, right? When we think about AI and all the technology that's coming like a freight train, how does the hospitality industry stay ahead? So there's simply just not the talent. And when we talk about talent, we're talking about everything from the property level in terms of maintenance and housekeeping, all the way up to management level.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different pockets of where we're missing talent, and some say it's more of like financing, it's accounting, and there's other areas that are harder to fill than others. But I would say that would be the short and sweet answer. What do you think, Bill?
Perfect. This worked out great.
So, a hospital pass to Lorraine, and she's got it back to you.
I know. I love it. But layering in on top of what Lorraine said, there's really a confluence of circumstances above and beyond, the daily operation. So traditionally our industry has been one of what's in the door today, what's in the house tonight, what's coming in tomorrow. What we're struggling with and what we're finding more and more is that this problem is going to be pervasive for a long time. And at the same time, what's happening is the brand stripped out all their resources, as part of COVID. They have not brought them back into play. At the same time, they've continued to evolve in the franchisees more than they have brand operators. And without those resources and management companies filling the gap, you've got this huge space where recruiting's not happening, training's not happening, pipeline's not happening, succession planning's not happening. Everybody's really focused now on trying to get through today, get the owners back their money. And then what do I want to say? The competition for those management contracts between the operators are kind of restricting their ability to fill in the gap relative to people in that recruiting and that training. So it's just an interesting dynamic that's going on both short term and long term in the hospitality world. That we don't see this problem going away. We just see it getting worse.
I'd be interested to get your view, because obviously I try and, you guys are deep into the industry, into the research, in your case, Lorraine, and I always try and kind of take a step back, although with all my years spent previously in recruiting and headhunting, this is an area I'm very passionate around, and the hotel sector in particular, because I think it's such a wonderful sector. But when I look at the studies that you guys have done over the years, when I read what's written, at times I feel it feels very disjointed. It feels as if we love to focus on small little pockets, like you said, Lorraine. Oh, it might be a problem in engineering, or it might be a problem in finance. I don't know. Maybe people do. Maybe I'm not reading the right articles. No one actually seems to turn around and say, "Hey, guys, just as an industry, we just have a massive problem. We are not attractive." And I know, and there's some bits we're going to come to in a minute when we're looking at the educational side. To me, that was almost damning in where we're going to be in 4 or 5 years' time. It's just going to drop off a cliff potentially. But as I said, you guys are the experts. I'm just kind of commentating. Is that an overly simplistic view, or is there some resonance in that? I don't mind who answers that. Lorraine, why don't you go first? Because I see you
like
kind of
that
almost ready to go.
No, because it's great to have that outside perspective, right? Because this is a fragmented industry. What you're seeing is exactly the way it is. I still don't understand all the makings of the industry. Bill has so much more in-depth knowledge. It's real estate, it's finance, it's legal. But what we need to do is say, no, is it one cohesive industry? Perhaps not, but perhaps look at it as all these individual opportunities. And maybe that is helpful. So maybe when you think of, okay, hospitality and front desk and washing sheets and cleaning rooms, that's not as interesting. But when we think about all the other aspects behind the industry, when we think about the legal and real estate and health and wellness and all these other aspects that create this really fragmented, dynamic industry, we can make it sound a lot more interesting for young people who are looking for careers.
That makes sense. Bill, what's your sort of take on it?
I'm the ever optimistic salesperson that I've always been, which is this is a great industry. I feel like if we went to these kids and said, "Hey, we could put you in, Montana one summer, we could put you in Hawaii another summer, we could put you in New York City another summer, we could put you someplace else." I mean, these kids would love to be able to go from an internship perspective, the dynamic of the industry and what it's afforded. I mean, this is really kind of upgraded the salaries. I've been hearing a lot of really, really good salaries being paid for junior people, and I think the industries, we aren't like an Apple, where we sell watches and phones and computers.
Yeah.
We sell experiences all over the world every night, in different environments and different boxes. There isn't one size that fits all, so our business model itself is somewhat fragmented.
Yep.
Look at all the brands that are out there, even though they're under, Hilton.
Like
and
five
Marriott,
groups or whatever, yeah.
It's like, wow, you got 35 brands and you're trying to figure out which one is different. And oh, by the way, now we're going to do independence,
yep.
As a sub-brand. So it's really hard, I don't want to damn the industry because I love the industry and that's why we do the study, but we've got to get a handle on how the industry organizations can coalesce, behind this kind of data, look at it. We're having conversations with HSMAI, AHLA, ISHC. I mean, you pick one, there's millions of them out there, right? But everybody's very focused in their niche.
Yep.
And that focus in their niche is all well and good, but the customer sees us as an industry, not as different niches.
And I think that's to my point. I look at it and Lorraine, we've got real estate, we've got management companies, we've got investment companies, we've got legal, we've got franchise, we've got owned. I don't care. My experience with a hotel is I turn up and I get a good service or I get a rubbish service. I get a nice hotel or I get an old stale hotel. I get motivated staff or I don't have motivated staff. I could imagine that a lot of people we're trying to attract to the industry, that's their first experience when they were growing up as children, or whether they didn't go to hotels and would have loved to have gone to hotels, or whether they experienced hotels. I mean, we all at probably some point in time have engaged in a positive experience, a positive destination that we went to. And it just feels as if somewhere between that experience and then getting a job, it kind of falls into some sort of abyss. And I'm wondering, sorry, go on.
Well, hotels are also going through such a transition, right, with digitization. So many people say, well, I want to go into hospitality because it's a people industry.
Yeah.
You know, now we're talking about, self check-in, right, and virtual keys. And so is it a tech industry? Is it a people industry? So there's also that point that I think is confusing when you think about, well, what do I really want to do? And is this really going to be fulfilling?
That probably feeds into, because I think a lot of people do see that the industry maybe isn't tech orientated, and sometimes they want something more tech orientated, and it seems a bit slower to adopt. And so, that to me, that's also a good selling point. But I don't want to go down that. That's not the purpose of this conversation. But one of the things that I did want to touch on, you've used the title, I've got the study in front of me, so if you hear papers rustling, forgive me, but you had a heading which is foreboding trends. And I'm going to read from here. College enrollment in hospitality, tourism, culinary schools is down, partially due to general lack of interest, partially due to demographic trends and general lack of interest among younger students. There are a few signs of a turnaround, and an aging workforce exacerbates the situation. Just talk to me about what you found there, because that sounds frightening.
Terrible.
Who wants to take that? Lorraine, go on. You were involved in this. If you pick that up.
Sure. So, I mean, lots of things fell into that. We can start with the work-life balance that employees are looking for, that people are looking for, that might have been exacerbated by COVID. So people want more of a hybrid work opportunity, and working, especially on property, or even working for a chain, working in an office, usually requires being in person. So that is just in conflict with what workers are looking for.
Right.
We're looking at the overabundance of hospitality schools and hospitality programs versus a demand. There's hospitality schools opening every day. There's just simply not enough students interested. Either they not interested in going into hospitality, maybe they can't afford the university tuition. So that's another foreboding trend. Just the fact that the demographics, we see that there's fewer people going in college, period. And we're also seeing an older population. Immigration trends, that certainly is, getting workers from overseas has been such an important element of building hotel staffing. And that basically slowed, right, over the past several years. So these are just some of the few foreboding trends that we recognized in the paper and trying to solve.
I'm going to pick up on one of those points around the educational piece, but Bill, anything to add into what Lorraine's just been saying there before I move?
I think, again, getting further out in front of this thing, this is going to sound like almost microscopic, but the reality of it is USA Facts put out, I read a lot of snippets here and there, trying to pick up on trends, but USA Facts put something out, I think last week, about the decline in fertility rate.
Okay. Right. Yeah, that's going to have a bearing.
I read another article in the Wall Street Journal that, cites the closure of maternity wards across the country. And then you read another article about, high school kids choosing to go to college. So again, from a trend perspective, and then you look at the macroeconomics of what's happening in the industry, hotels continuing to be built, inventories continuing to be added. Technology is not going to be able to solve the resource issues.
Not all of them,
because people are always going to want to be able to go to the desk or call the PBX or whatever. I'm showing my age. But they're going to want to have somebody there to solve that problem because they need that extra pillow, or they need this, or they need that. Things are going to have to be done by people. It's just a matter of how many. But again, the long-term trending, is we've got to get out of this 30-day mentality, 365-day mentality, and think about it in terms of 5 to 10 years.
And I think to your point, if we weren't building more hotels, then okay, maybe technology would pick up some redistribution of staff. You know, there would still be some gaps, but it wouldn't be maybe as prominent. But the pace at which hotels are being built, and this is international, and so, you know, there is still the ability for people to travel and move, and some areas are more restrictive than others. So the competition is there within the industry, within our own, you know, sometimes within our own brands as well. But when you're looking at, and, you know, your point to birth rates, you know, that's an issue that's occurring a lot across a lot of Western countries. And we're even seeing it in one of the most populated over in China as well. They've had those. So, you know, everywhere there is an issue around that, well, that is going to, yes, much more longer term, create a staffing challenge for every industry. And so therefore that resource, if we're not competitive now, that resource becomes even more precious. And if we're losing at this point, how are we going to be adapting? What are we doing? Are we just going to wait and hope, or are we actually going to be proactive? Lorraine, what's your kind of pick up on some of those points?
Yeah, well, to your point, the traveling population is growing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at the same time, demand, well, last year was at a peak.
Mm-hmm.
And even just looking at the US and looking at room revenue, from 21 to 23 grew 40%.
Mm-hmm.
So, and a lot of that, of course, was average rates were very high as well.
Yeah.
So we have this industry, this demand that is pushing, continuing to grow, and yet that dwindling workforce at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's exasperating the issue. Yeah.
And the more demand there is, the more people see it as a good place to invest. So therefore the natural to want to increase and build more.
Right.
And so
going on the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, creating brand new markets.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, they are going to need to be staffed, and that will pull people. It's the complexities of it. But to me, a large part of this starts, and we'll come to how much of the responsibility also sits with the hotel industry itself. But I just want to touch on the educational piece first, because a lot of times someone's got to, you know, does there have to be a change, I guess is what I'm asking. You know, are we moving away from having the classic hospitality school that people would go to? Are we going to be looking at the way the courses need to be structured? Are we looking at people not sitting there doing courses for 4 years, 5 years now, and maybe shortening those courses? Where do we think education has a role to play? Was there anything that came out of the study that indicated some signs of what may be happening and what people should be aware of and considering? Who wants to pick that one up first? Bill, you going to throw it, sir?
Sure. So I mentioned earlier about there's a supply and demand issue with the 4-year degree and beyond for hospitality. Of course, there's a place for hospitality schools and a career in hospitality where you're learning all the basics. And so, but that's not it. And that shouldn't be the be all and end all.
Mm-hmm.
Why not go and consider recruiting out of training schools? Why not go to high school and start to recruit there?
Mm-hmm.
Why not go to community outreach? Why not have more apprenticeship programs? So the truth is, we really don't always need that 4-year degree to get into the hospitality. Matter of fact, why don't we have a 2-year degree, and perhaps then once we're working, we can continue our education, right? So we need to just think differently. I don't want to say we're going to lower the bar, because we're not, because we're still looking for really successful, motivated.
Well, that also
people.
becomes risky, doesn't it?
Yes, but their education can happen as they're working. Their education could happen through upskilling, through job training. It doesn't have to be always that 4-year university that so many very motivated and talented people just simply aren't interested in or can't afford.
Yeah. Bill, your take on it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of talent out there. You know, it's just a matter of where you traditionally would find the bigger brands going to the bigger universities that have had the larger hospitality programs. Those have shrunk. they're focusing on them. But there's, as we've done our research and reached out to two-year colleges, community colleges, things along those lines, there's plenty of talent out there. We just need to kind of get over the bias of, well, I need a 4-year hospitality person, because again, as the demographic of the leadership of our industry has aged,
Mm-hmm.
The philosophies and the business management philosophies have not necessarily aged
Mm-hmm.
with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a boomer. I'm an age of the boomer, but when I started the company, we're remote, we're contract. People like, oh my God, you were country before country was cool, kind of thing. But we've always been this way, and that's kind of the way that our company runs. That's kind of the talent we provide. And yeah, without looking at, like Lorraine said, the capabilities and the competencies versus the degree, we'll never solve the problem.
Does this, maybe it provides the bridge to us talking about the industry, and this is not about hating on anybody. These are trends that are out there, and it's saying, hey, exactly. But does this lend us, and does this reinforce that image that the hotel industry tends to take a long time to adapt to change? And to your point, and where I'm trying to link the last thing we're talking to into maybe needing to be more creative, if we still have this recruitment philosophy of, we go to the hotel schools, we go to the main universities, we expect somebody at a certain level to come in with a degree, if we're not being broader in terms of looking at where talent could be, is that not again just, well, that's what we've always done? And being slow to change means that other people are being more agile, more adaptive. They're looking at different areas. They're picking up that talent. They're getting to speak to them and pitch their industry, which the hotel industry isn't doing because it's still sticking with what it's always done. In much the same way it's taken so long for them to adopt new technology. And maybe the pandemic, which kicked on their drive to invest in technology, could that be the catalyst for actually looking and saying, hey, we need to fundamentally shake up where we are fishing for our talent, if I use that analogy? What's just a general take? Bill, maybe because you have a broader, you've got that broad overview of the industry. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I'll say first and foremost, the three of us, kind of come from the industry, so we're probably our own harshest critics, But when you step away from that and you think about how the industry's been modeled from the get-go, these companies are public companies now.
Mm-hmm.
Marriott, Hilton, the integration of Starwood, we're owner-based, operator-based. So I remember back in the day when I was with Marriott, we went to flat screen TVs.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to be such a big deal to go to flat screen TVs because the owners, if you had a 300-room hotel at $400 a room, you were spending $120,000, and the owners were like, no, we're not going to do that.
Uh-huh.
That's been our business model.
Yep.
So we're swimming upstream relative to that, and then you throw in shareholder price. Again, I'm looking at Marriott. They've got their Marcia system. They've had it forever.
Mm-hmm.
They've been wanting to sunset it forever. It looks like they're pretty close to being able to do that and moving in that direction. But again, it's such a big capital expense to a publicly held company that if we were running the company, we would think differently about it too.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more of how do we as a industry, have a long-term vision, set by industry leaders. And again, I remember very vividly, they may have called it collusion back in the day, or they may still call it, but Baron Hilton, Mr. Marriott, and Mr. Pritzker would, get together and talk a little bit about what's going on in the industry, and how do we help the industry? How do we move it forward collectively?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we're competitors and we're across the street from each other, but let's do what's best for the industry, maybe not necessarily just for my flag in Chicago.
Interesting.
So we could use a little bit more of that.
Yeah. Lorraine?
Yeah, we need more mentors. We need more champions, and Bill put it perfectly. We need the industry to come together to do that. And as we discussed, this is a very fragmented industry. How do we get, and all the organizations kind of have their own agenda. How do we get everyone together? How do we get leaders together? And I think, at some point it's just going to be out of desperation. Like, we have no choice. And I think we're getting to that point.
Within the study, you've got a section there, which is you've titled A Better Reputation. And again, reading from there are many efforts designed to fix the negative perception of hospitality as a career choice. And then you go on to talk a little bit about what the study shows with regards to what do people find, or why do you find the recruitment process difficult, and then looking from the industry, how do you attract and retain talent? Without going into all the detail, because obviously that's why people can download the study and read it themselves, but were there any kind of highlights or any obvious elements that came out of there that you think there could really be a focus that could improve that reputation of the industry as a place to consider building a career rather than it just being a job? Lorraine, do you want to just pick that up?
Pay. Number one. The Bureau of Labor Statistics always shows hospitality pay is like the lowest of all job functions. And of course, that's for certain types of positions in hospitality, not all of them.
Yeah.
But, that's number one. And that flexibility that we mentioned earlier is number two. Maybe it's job sharing, just allowing people to work either, to choose. I want to work just mornings or afternoons. I want to just work 3 days a week. I want to work just 2 days a week. Maybe it's building morale. And, by that, it's offering childcare services. If you're in the mountains, offer free ski passes, free lunches. These worked in the tech field. Why not hospitality where you should be offering free food? So, these are kind of things that we think are very simple, but making people feel like, yeah, I'm really part of something. I'm part of something that's diverse. I'm part of something that is connecting travelers, connecting people. We can make hospitality what it is. We need to position it for what it is. And it is a terrific and dynamic, diverse, fully cultural industry.
And
Bill, adding on to that, because I thought it was really well.
I kind of feel like Rocky, in Rocky 1, where I'm going 12 rounds and I'm getting slapped around and beaten up. And then finally I wake up and I bounce out and I win. I come to the table and I'm a winner. And I think that's where the industry's got to go. I mean, it's just, we've got to go. Because again, the dynamics, and you look at the macro pieces of this, owners will not continue to, bite the hand that feeds them. At some point in time, the business is going to have to balance out. We're starting to see the salaries come up. We're starting to see, almost the overextension the other way of hiring brand new people, giving them a lot of money, giving them a lot of responsibility when they're not ready.
Yeah.
They're just not there.
Just
so the
trying to get a body
impact on the bottom line is I've got people in leadership positions that really don't know what they're doing, especially in revenue management, that are now supposed to be yielding my prices. And now they got to look at business mix, and now they got to look at weekend, weekday, and now they got to look at the subsegmentation. They have no idea how to do that, because all they had to do was change the price.
Yeah.
So, again, the business trends will force change, but the question is, can the industry change?
That makes,
it's not about changing your operating model in Kansas City. It's about changing your operating model in the United States or internationally.
Yeah.
Is a hospitality program considered at the same professional level as it is in Europe? No, it's not. People want to be. Why do they want to be?
Yeah.
Because it's glamorous. Are they working long days? Yes. But at the same time, they're checking in celebrities. They're being part of unbelievable events like Oscar parties, and there's people coming in out of the hotels all the time from all walks of life. And, we're just not excited about selling that anymore because we're forgetting what it is. We're taking our beating every round in and round out. At some point, we're going to have to come out of the corner and swing away.
Come out fighting. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to touch on when we were talking about the responsibility for the industry, and we've looked a little bit at working on improving the reputation. And then you've also got some elements in the study which talk about finding talent in different areas, developing some creative solutions. So I want to come to that in a minute. But first, it was just something that just popped into my head. And Bill, I want to ask you this, because as you said, you've been in the industry, you've built your own company. Back to my point about people seem to quite like to pick up on certain bits. So we might say, okay, let's make the job more flexible. Let's pay a bit more money. Let's do this. Let's do. The one thing I very rarely hear anybody say is we need stronger leadership. We need stronger people to motivate and to encourage and to sell our industry. We need passionate leaders. As somebody who's been a leader in the industry and then been a leader in their own business, where does leadership actually fit in this, both in terms of leading the industry, but then leading leading your hotel and being a place to want to come to work every day? I mean, if you're working in a team, a football team or American football or soccer or whatever you call it, you can certainly see when the manager's lost the dressing room, to use that phrase. But you can see the difference when a strong manager or strong leader steps in. So what's your view on that?
Well, certainly you can't do anything without a good leader, and being a good leader is different based upon the circumstances, the organization, and the expectations, but again, I think people are people. I think it's a convenient thing to broad brush generations, and put them into buckets just so they're manageable. But the reality of it is, again, I've got children in their 30s and 40s, and now there's grandchildren, and people are people. They all want to. I was talking with somebody the other day about this who's in the HR thing, and surveys that I remember seeing in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, not so much since I started the company, but the survey results are still the same. The top three is not pay. No. It's, am I heard? Am I valued? Am I listened to? Do I contribute? It's all about how they're being invested in and how much they're willing to invest back. So leadership, back to your point, is it's a necessity, but the style of leadership, and like you said, that passion, that excitement, that commitment is contagious.
Yeah. I feel
and there's just not that excitement anymore.
Yeah, I feel there are managers.
It's still one of the best businesses ever.
Yeah, I feel there are good managers. I wonder how many there are good leaders, and to me, there's a massive difference. Sorry, Lorraine.
To be a leader, you need to stay. I think that's another issue. People have left. So new people are in. They're just still kind of feeling their way around a new organization. Learning the ropes.
Yep.
You need to have that confidence. You need to have that history to be a good leader. So that's going to take some time to build that up again.
Yeah. And you need role models.
They need to be organizational. They can't be, one general manager or one hotel in one city or one CVB or one, convention center operating that way.
Yeah.
It's got to be an experience that somebody's going to have wherever they go. And again, everybody's going to operate their companies differently. But again, I'm probably aging myself. I remember, when I started with Marriott, Mr. Marriott Sr. would come through each hotel with Junior, who now everybody thinks is Mr. Marriott. But they would go through every hotel, and they would stop and they would shake everybody's hands and they would do everything else, and they'd get them to tell them everything they needed to tell them. And then they would go into the general managers, close the door and say, what the hell are you doing? Why do these people not have uniforms or this or that? And they would follow through. So, they were the face of the company, they were the heart of the company, but at the same time, they were the business of the company.
Yeah.
It's that balance, like we're saying, leaders versus managers.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And I think your point where you were talking about pay, yes, it's important. But I remember in my old recruitment days, I had a boss who said to me, okay, the one thing you'll do is you'll find that pay is on the bus, but it's very rarely driving it. There's always something else that's leading the individual's decision as to why they're looking to move or to take that job. Okay, just want to, because I'm conscious of both of your time, I want to move on to some of the conclusions you were drawing or suggestions that you were drawing as I look here at the study. You're titled under Finding Talent in the Rough. And you were talking about different areas to look at, and also looking at sort of thinking outside of the box, creative solutions. So can I just, Lorraine, maybe you could pick up on some of those elements there. Maybe we could start with finding the talent in the rough, and then maybe pivoting into some of the creative solutions.
Sure. So we looked at community outreach
Hmm.
as finding talent, and whether that's youth programs, veterans programs. I mean, it comes from so many different places that to find people who want to work, but maybe haven't even thought about working in hospitality.
Interesting.
So a lot of that is very local.
Hmm.
And that would mean that for a hotel, they need to reach out to the community, reach out really to the DMO, the destination organization, the tourist offices, just reach out to local governments and see what opportunities there are, what kind of job fairs there might be.
Hmm.
And then welcome, have apprenticeships, maybe have a cook-offs or contests, just something to kind of bring people together and get them more knowledgeable about the opportunities in that community, or
Yeah.
whether it's that town, that city, that region of where their needs in hospitality. So I think that that's a big part of it, is that you just need to, maybe you need to go to a high school and speak at a high school job fair. I mean,
Be interesting,
why
wouldn't
not
it?
get young people to start thinking about hospitality as career at the earliest
Yeah.
level you can?
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. And Bill, I mean, this going local seems to be it seems to be a theme that's running in a lot of areas of the hotel. Finding local providers to be more sustainable. Are we really targeting our local businesses or our local market in terms of filling some of that spare inventory that we may have that we want to utilize? But I don't know to what degree we really engage locally with our community from a recruiting point of view. What have you seen? Because you're involved a lot around this.
It's situational, case by case at best.
Mm-hmm.
Those anybody that's doing it, probably those best practices in general terms, have no place to go.
Mm-hmm.
You may be engaging locally, but who do you pass that idea on to, and who supports that initiative to make it, industry wide or brand wide or, operator wide? Again, that infrastructure, is just not there. It hasn't been passed on. I mean, it's just going to be time and patience and foresight that's going to solve the problem. If we continue to react versus proact as an industry, we're going to stay in this thing for a while. People talk about technology being the solution, and it's AI. Well, if that AI is going to cost me, $50 million to implement system wide,
That ain't gonna happen.
I'm probably going to go for plan B or plan C. So it's like, okay, let's face facts for what they are. Let's get together and as an industry and say, okay, how do we fix our talent problem?
And that's the point.
We don't respond to everything that's being said. We don't look at just those studies as being myopic. We kind of take them and say, that's not truly how the industry is. That's not how people are being paid. That's not what's changing in the industry. So again, from a creative solution perspective, I know us as a business practice, we engage partners that fill blanks that we don't have. It's like, okay, who's really good at this? Who's really good at revenue management? Great. We're bringing in a revenue management partner, to solve this problem for our customers and to fill a void in what our service gap might be. It's not about being a competitor. It's about being a complementary service. And I don't see it necessarily like an airline program where, I'm with American and Singapore and Qatar and everything else. No, because again, you could have a different experience with each one. It's really about aligning yourself with like-minded business people, like-minded service orientation, like-minded execution, and going off and doing it, not being afraid of that dialogue. But engaging in that dialogue in order to optimize. Again, I had a great conversation the other day with ISHC, and they're willing to partner with us on a creative solution in engaging people. So, again, without asking the question or opening up that conversation, you'll never get
happening, would it?
Again, old sales guy knows, yes, just waiting to happen. So
no, that makes sense. Any again, final thoughts and around the creative solution points, Lorraine? Were there any that when you were looking at the study and bringing that study together within the creative solutions, are there any that we haven't touched on that are worth kind of highlighting in terms of just thought provoking?
I mean, it's, we didn't talk about social media, but obviously,
Yep.
TikTok, Instagram, just, get out there on social media, and there's so much you can do to present your offering, like, look at this great career we could be having in hotels.
Yeah.
So I think you need to reach people where they're at.
It's about taking the message out, isn't it?
It's probably something that is overused, honestly, Trevor. What's old is new. Back to basics.
Yeah.
A coach takes over a team that can't function. What do? They break them down and they teach them how to play the fundamentals again, and then they build out from there. So any successful program is really based upon accepting the reality of where you are and then creating the appropriate solution for that. The Chicago Bulls were a terrible team. You could say Phil Jackson did this, and the manager did that, but again, it was everybody coming together and saying, we've got a plan. This is the way we want to build our program, and this is what success looks like to us. And that's where the creativity comes in.
Yeah.
It's like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just need to reposition the wheel.
Yeah.
Or you could invent the wheel like United did and said, look, we don't have enough pilots. Let's build a pilot school.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's accepting there's a problem, and accepting there's a big problem, and the problem's not going away.
That's number one.
And the problem's going to get worse based on what you take your study plus every other study and trends that are out there. If you pull these pictures together, this is not a pleasant story to be reading if you are going forward 5, 10, 15 years for the industry. So unless a collective body turns around and says, guys, we are really looking into the abyss unless we start to do something and take responsibility and take ownership, and then ask the question, how do we fix it? It's just being done. To me, it's being done in this fragmented, piecemeal way. We're focusing on little bits here, there. We're still competing against each other rather than actually looking and say collectively we have a problem. So hopefully what you're doing, Bill and Lorraine, in terms of bringing these studies and in terms of, Bill, in your case, having these conversations to just say to people, look, it's not us, it's what the data's telling us. What are we doing about it? And trying to drive that change. Hopefully that'll create that momentum, which is what we really need. But that's all my questions for this. And as I said, I've said it a couple of times, I'm conscious of your time. So I kind of wrapped up from our point of view, but any final thoughts or final comments from your side before we wrap this up?
So Bill, I'd like to add, because this was an idea that came from you, brainstorming, is why don't we next really look at the pipeline, like closely look at the pipeline and try to understand the thought processes there. And that would require understanding what young people are thinking, what students are thinking. That might be in trade schools, that might be in the high school level, the college level, the university level, about what they want out of their careers, how they perceive a career in hospitality, and to give us an idea of what might be holding them back or what might motivate them.
She's giving away this year's survey, what we're going to do next year. So, but yeah, you're right. It's a matter of just continuing to stay out in front, continuing to paint the picture, and I think that's our obligation, and that's our mantra. Where are we going? Where we are is where we are. Where we've been is where we've been. But where are we going? Because you can't get in front of it unless you know what's coming at you.
Well, you can't change today, and you certainly can't change yesterday, but you can change tomorrow.
Agreed. And Trevor, as always, it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you so much.
And great to talk with both of you today. Thanks so much. Well, I hope that conversation was of interest, and thanks again to Bill and Lorraine for joining us. If you have any thoughts or views on this conversation, please feel free to comment below. If you like the discussion, please don't forget a thumbs up. And if you're interested in more of our videos, here is a link to our Expert Insights playlist, and here is the link to our Coffee Time Chat playlist. And here is the button if you'd like to subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. Thanks again for watching.